Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, hope you're all doing all right out there. So you may have seen there's some proposed changes to the CBT, the motorcycle CBT, compulsory basic training. This is how a 16 or 17-year-old gets onto a motorcycle in the UK if you don't know. So, you should know because this is why you're watching about the changes. So the Motorcycle Industry Association and the National Motorcycle Council have basically previously asked for changes to the CBT, and I did a video on that many years ago, and none of them ever happened. And they've basically sent a letter through again and said, no, you really need to get this done because we're seeing the problems of not doing those things. And there are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 proposed changes. Some of these are from the previous changes, some of these look kind of new. So I thought, so I can keep you informed, I'm going to go through and explain what the proposed changes are and whether I think it's a good or a bad thing. You can go into the comments afterwards and give your opinions on if you think it's a good or a bad thing. One of the proposals is a progressive access training program, which is exactly what lots of people have wanted. You want to go from an A2 to a full A license. At the current times, you have to just retake the license. Seems silly. I think they're proposing basically that if you're on an A2, you can do 7 hours of training with a school, and they will then automatically upgrade you to a full A if they're happy with you. I think that will make some people very happy. I think that'll also make some people very mad when they work out that 7 hours of training is probably going to cost more than a Mod 1 and a Mod 2. You know, you win, you lose. When you have a CBT, you don't actually get penalty points, as it were. You just get a telling off or you lose your CBT. They're proposing putting 6 points in. Like when you pass your test for the first time, whether it be in a car or a bike, any of these things, you are given 6 points to start with for 2 years, basically. So it's like, don't mess around for the first 2 years because you're a new driver. After that, you get 12 points and you can, well, I'm not saying you can go and do silly things, but they're saying basically you're experienced more, that you might be a bit safer. That's what that is all about. But yeah, they're proposing putting a 6-point limit on the CBT. I agree with it. I don't see why it shouldn't be on there. You get that license so easily, you should be held as accountable to someone who has to work really hard to get a full license. So yeah. Another thing they want to change, which I think is absolutely fantastic for the safety of riders and is something I have been saying for years people shouldn't do, is when you do a full license, you pass on a manual, you can ride a manual or an auto. If you pass on an auto, you can only drive an auto. Cars, bikes, all of them the same, apart from the CBT. And what they do on the CBT very often is if you go and wanted to ride a geared 125, they're like, oh, you're not very good at that, we're not going to pass you today, so let's get you on this automatic scooter, 50, or maybe 125 auto, but the point is, put you on an auto, knowing you're going to ride a manual, to get you through the day and past the CBT, and then throw you out on the street knowing you're going to have to go and learn gears on the road by yourself. It is incredibly irresponsible. I do understand why the schools want to do it, because some people just want to get the CBT passed and then practice in a car park. That's great. But trust people to do that, trust people to train themselves, be safe. It's mental. It's schools just trying to rake in money, and they basically want to make it so if on the CBT you pass on an auto, you can only ride an auto. Exactly the same as all the other licenses. I am fully behind that, as much as many people may not be. The next one is taking the theory test before you do your CBT. I fully agree with this because the schools very often don't go through the highway code enough, and theory is easy anyway. You need to know that basic knowledge, so having that before a CBT I think is a very wise decision. The next one is changing the syllabus of the CBT to 4 parts rather than 5, I think. But basically it's just breaking it down into different sections, I assume to make people learn easier. We'll skip on from that one. Okay, the next one is to do with improving the quality of the instructors. Instructors, correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is if you want to teach CBT, it's quite easy to qualify to do that. If you want to do direct access and the full licenses, you have to do a lot more work to get that allowance. Previously, you could do the lower one and keep doing CBTs continuously without ever worrying about having to step up. But now they want to suggest that once you're qualified to do CBTs, you don't sit doing that forever. You have to get qualified to do the direct access. I think that's to raise the skill level and the quality of the instructors and make sure you haven't got people who've skimmed through just to skim other people through. So you've got all these people out on the road with virtually no riding ability at all, which is something that's happened since lockdown. I know they've had to really get people through the courses, but I have never seen such poor drivers as the delivery drivers around Portsmouth. They are awful. They are some of the worst riders I've ever seen. Improved quality assurance. I think that basically means they are going to visit more schools, vet more schools, and take away entitlements more often if schools don't do what they're supposed to do. When you do a CBT, it should take 8 hours. About 6 hours in the car park, yard, wherever they do it, doing manoeuvres and things, talking about highway code and stuff like that, and then you should do a minimum of 2 hours on the road. And if you're safe to do all that, then they give you a CBT at the end of it. Some of these places are, as I say, are literally just giving people certificates. Some people are doing it 5 minutes in a car park and 5 minutes out on the road. Very few people seem to actually do the full day. Good schools will, and it's important for you as a rider that you get the full training you've paid for. I mean, this is the thing, people defend them, but it's like, look, you've paid them to do a job they're not doing that keeps you safe. And on the back of that, you have earned recognition for training schools. And that's a brilliant thing, because as you know, how do you know if a training school is good around the country? Google reviews, word of mouth, ask around. It would be much better if there was an actual official sort of standard award system that you could go, oh, okay, they've got that standard, they're going to be held to that point, they actually are that good. Now, that might make those schools slightly more expensive, but then maybe they won't do that to try and attract more customers. You know, I think it's a good thing. And the very last thing they want to do is making the whole system digital. So rather than getting a paper certificate, although you may do on the day, the way that the schools then enter those into the DVLA system is they take the book, which is, well, when they do the CBT, you have a book with 2 copies of each certificate and carbon paper. They write it out, you get one half, they get the other half. The book gets sent to the DVLA, someone goes through that and has to enter all those things. It would obviously be 10 times easier if the instructor at the end of the day can just go onto a computer and type in your details and then it can automatically be entered into the system. Makes sense. Those, as I say, are the proposed changes to the CBT. Half of them are really about schools and instructors, and the other half are about just making people a little bit safer and bringing people up to a higher standard. And I don't see a problem with any of it. The only one I actually see any problem with is the fact that the progressive training, if it is 7 hours of training, is going to cost more than it was before. And that's the whole point people had, was that, you know, well, you go from an A to an A, you have to pay for your whole license again. You don't. You actually just need a bike to do it on, and you need to do your mod 1 and 2, which costs about 100 quid for the tests and maybe 100 quid for the bike rental for the day if you go to your school or whatever. Well, that's a couple of hundred quid. 7 hours of training, how much is that going to cost? Depends on the school. Depends if they do some sort of system where it's the same money and you do it anyway. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I do worry that that could end up being more expensive to upgrade, but easier. Or actually not easier, because you can just do the mod 1 and 2 like you did before. I don't know. Anyway, give me your comments below on all this. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you're new here. If you want to help support this channel, consider doing that through Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. Links in the description. Oh, I also have a sale on my clothing, which you'll see in a pinned comment, which gets you 10% off anything in that website store of my things. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.